All right, everyone, welcome and thank you so much for being here. My name is Alexandria and I'm one of the co-chairs of Caracol DSA. And I'm also a member of the brand new upstate South Carolina chapter of DSA. So I'd like to just share a quick congratulations to everyone down here who's been working really hard to form this new chapter. And I encourage you all to follow and connect with all our ongoing work. So I'll put a link in the chat there. Now to start, I'd like to quickly introduce Caracol DSA, the host of today's event. We are a group of eco-socialist organizers working to bring degrowth into the heart of the US left. We understand that capitalism is not just failing, it's actively driving ecological breakdown. It demands ever-increasing extraction, production, consumption, and even when these no longer serve human well-being. And the result is rising emissions, mass extinction, deepening inequality, and even genocide, all for the sake of profit. So degrowth offers us a different horizon. It calls for a planned democratic reduction of excess energy and resource use, starting in the rich nations that have caused the crisis, so that we can bring the global economy back into balance with the living world. So it's about scaling down destructive sectors like fossil fuels, arms, industrial agriculture, while expanding what really matters, like healthcare, housing, food, and just time to live well. So in Caracol, we're organizing to politicize the growth imperative and build power with workers, climate justice movements, and communities on the front lines. And it's our aim to deepen and strengthen Green New Deal politics within a framework rooted in ecological science, post-colonial critique, and the realities of planetary limits. So we believe that degrowth is not about scarcity, it's about liberation, and it's about moving beyond capitalism and toward a world where human flourishing no longer comes at the expense of others or of the earth. Now, a quick plug, since we are currently recruiting as a caucus, if you are ready to imagine and fight for a post-growth future of justice, care, and repair, we invite you to join us. And I will just pop our link in the chat as well. So today is not just about learning, it's about generating strategic action. So the first hour will be the panel presentation, followed up by a teach-in where we'll split up into breakout rooms to spend some time reflecting, discussing, and generating tangible take-home organizing together. So you'll be able to choose at that point from 4 different rooms with topics facilitated by Caracol members, each with experience in the area of that topic. And we'll share these topics right now in the chat ahead of the panel, just in case they might help you apply what we're learning to your own life and to your community. Real quick, share these. Now, finally, a quick intro to STAC and a few discussion norms for today. So to help us make this space as inclusive, productive, and democratic as possible, we'll be using STAC. STAC just means we'll keep a queue of whoever wants to speak. So if you'd like to speak or ask a question, just write the word STAC in the chat and we will add you to the list. And we're going to use a form called progressive STAC, which means that if you've already spoken and others haven't, we may prioritize new voices first. So if you do get taken out of order, that's why. A few quick discussion norms to guide us today. We'd like us all to assume positive intent. We are all on different steps in our journey. Also to please use plain lived experience language versus jargon. And finally, just that we'd like to remember that we are all here rooted in what we're fighting for. We all have something to lose from the injustices of climate change and colonial violence, and we all have something to gain by coming together. So without further delay, welcome again, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. We'll take just about 5 more minutes to set the stage for our panelists by giving some context. And I have a few slides to share with you. So tonight's teach-in is called Resist Genocide and Ecocide, Build Democratic Socialism. Now that's a bold title, and it has to be. It's rooted in a simple but urgent premise that genocide and ecocide are not isolated crises. They are structural features of the same system, imperial capitalism. Now, if we want a livable planet and a liberated people, we have to understand these violences as intertwined, and we have to organize to confront them together. So let's begin with a definition. Anti-imperialism just means opposing a global system where powerful states and corporations dominate land, labor, and resources, especially in the global South, all for their own profit. So it's not only about foreign wars or military bases, though that's certainly involved, but it's also about the everyday structure of the world economy, how power is organized, how wealth flows, and whose lives are treated as expendable. Now, this system depends on endless economic growth, growth that feeds the profits of the few by extracting more and more from the rest of us. That's more fossil fuels, more minerals, more land, more labor. And when people resist, when they defend their ecosystems or their sovereignty or simply their right to survive, they are met with violence. And that's where genocide and ecocide come in. Now, these are not accidental outcomes of a broken system. They are deliberate tools of empire. In Palestine, we see genocide used to clear land and crush resistance, all backed by US weapons, funded by US tax dollars, and justified by imperial narratives. In places like the Congo and the Amazon, we see ecocide with mass deforestation, mining, pipelines, pollution, carried out to serve supply chains that fuel the global north. And often, as we will hear from our panelists today, these two forms of violence go hand in hand. The destruction of ecosystems enables the displacement of people, and the displacement of people enables further extraction. So it's a cycle of militarized accumulation and a system that treats both people and the planet as disposable. So what does this have to do with democratic socialism and with degrowth? Democratic socialism is not just about public health care or higher wages, though we absolutely need both. It's also about taking power back from capital and putting it in the hand of communities. It means collective control over the economy, over energy systems, over land and labor, so that we can meet human needs instead of corporate profit. And degrowth is a key part of that vision because the problem is not just inequality, it's the imperial mode of production itself. The system that says more is always better, no matter the cost. And it's a system that can only survive by burning more fossil fuels, building more mega projects, and suppressing more resistance. As I mentioned before, degrowth is not about sacrifice or austerity. It's actually about justice. And in fact, it's about abundance, but just shared and redefined. It's about scaling down the material throughput of rich countries, so their energy use, resource extraction, carbon emissions, so that the rest of the world can live and thrive. It's about scaling down wasteful, violent sectors of the economy like fossil fuels, arms, and industrial agriculture, and scaling up the things that actually sustain life like care, health, nutritious food, housing, and restoration. It's about redistributing power away from corporations and empires and towards communities and ecosystems. So to resist genocide and ecocide, we need to dismantle the economic engines that actually drive them. This means confronting US empire. It means building solidarity across movements and borders, and it means organizing for a different kind of world, one that's rooted in ecology, democracy, and justice. Now, after the panel, as I mentioned, we'll have an interactive session for collective discussion and strategy, because again, it's not just a learning space today, it's a place to organize. And together we'll explore how our fights are connected and how to build real power in our communities. And we need each other to build what comes next. So let's begin and let's build something radically better. All right, so without further delay, we'll jump into our panel presentation, starting with Mazin Qumsiyeh, who is a Palestinian scientist and author. He's the founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University, where he also teaches. Mazin will speak today as a scientist and as a person with ongoing lived experience at the intersection of both ecocide and genocide in Palestine.
Thank you very much, Alexandria. I'll try to be brief, and I'm not going to show any PowerPoint or anything like that. Basically, if you look at what's happened in the global systems in the past 150, 200 years, we've had many genocides, of course, and many attempted ecocide of all our systems, the global, and even earlier than that, if you think of the European colonization in North America and the European colonization in Australia and what became known as Australia and the United States, and how much damage to the environment happened in those places. For example, bringing invasive species, destroying virgin forests, and so on. This is part and parcel of the same system that you were talking about, a system of profit ahead of people and ahead of nature. This system ended up destroying much of our planet, and now the climax of it is basically the climate change, of course, which every human being is now feeling. With hurricanes, changes in temperature, decrease in rainfall, etc. This is part and parcel of the system of greed and colonization that has been going on since the Europeans, of course, colonized much of the world. And actually, there hasn't been really a country that escaped this system of colonization and destruction of its environment for the sake of profit of few individuals. So if we take the example of Palestine, where I'm from, I'm speaking to you from Bethlehem, by the way, birthplace of Jesus, and I look at what has happened in this country where I am, where I was born. This country was rich in biodiversity and rich in human diversity. Indigenous people here lived in relative harmony with nature ever, excuse me, since we invented agriculture. Agriculture first happened in this area, which is the Fertile Crescent, as you know, about 12,000 years ago. Humans made the first transition from hunter-gatherers to agricultural and pastoral communities. Domestication of plants and animals, plants like wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas, olives, and animals like goats and donkeys and sheep and so on. This all happened in the Fertile Crescent first. And so our region had 12,000 years of settled communities. Now, what had happened in these settled communities is small villages that thrived in relative harmony with nature until the Europeans came around and brought us something called Zionism, a colonial system, which says we don't like to have rich biodiversity in this land. We don't like to have rich human diversity in this land. Palestine before 1948 was multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual society. There were 44 languages spoken in Palestine. And the idea is to transform it to become the Jewish state of Israel. And the end result is very clear, and to anybody who has access to internet or who can see or who can read books, their situation is catastrophic. 8.5 million indigenous people are refugees or displaced people. That's us, my relatives, our friends and colleagues. And since 1948, at least 500,000 Palestinians have been killed, 200,000 of them just in the past 18, 19 months of this accelerating genocide in Gaza. This is accompanied by destruction of everything, not just the people, but everything that makes it possibly livable Gaza, or the West Bank for that matter, where I'm from, it's the same thing. So basically, this destruction is not new, by the way. It didn't happen just since October 2023. Even from the beginning of the Zionist project, like the beginning of the colonial project in what became the United States of America, they destroyed indigenous people, and they destroyed rivers, and they destroyed virgin forests. So in 1948, for example, Israel uprooted over 500 Palestinian villages and towns, but also uprooted the trees around them, both domestic trees and wild trees. And they planted only one kind of tree, which is pine tree, Pinus halepensis, a monoculture to replace a polyculture. They also, in the 1950s, diverted the course of the Jordan River basin and dried up the Jordan River to replace agriculture that's indigenous agriculture with imported kinds of irrigated agriculture in the western parts of the country. So the River Jordan is no longer a river. It used to flow at 1,350 million cubic meters per year. Now it flows at only 20 million cubic meters per year. And I could go on with many other examples of the environmental catastrophe, the ecocide that happened since 1948. In the most recent genocidal war on Gaza, on the people of Gaza, Israel uprooted most of the trees in Gaza. We did some research studies on this. Our institute, by the way, the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, is interested in conservation of human and natural communities. Because of this, we do several things, including research. So we publish 2 papers a month, and we just published a paper on the destruction of tree cover in Gaza, the destruction of greenhouses in Gaza, destruction of habitats for endangered species in Gaza, and so on. That's what we do. We publish those kinds of papers. And the idea of publishing papers is to understand what's going on, how much ecocide, how much genocide, how much medicide, destruction of hospitals, how much scholasticide, destruction of all the universities in Gaza, for example. We wrote a research paper on that. So this is what we do in terms of the research and the importance of research. Then we do a lot of education for children, education for university students, but that's education in terms of awareness of injustice, whether it's environmental injustice or human rights violations of our people, etc. And education is, of course, with the intention of changing behavior and empowerment. And that is basically a form of resistance, that forms resistance, that informs resistance when you do the education. And resistance is towards what? Towards, again, achieving what is opposite of what colonial capitalist systems want, which is destruction of people and the environment. So we work aggressively. And I was arrested myself many times by the Israeli army and harassed a lot of times. So we work aggressively to achieve this justice for our people. And of course, we don't just fight the colonial, racist, capitalist system. We build alternative systems. So we have food sovereignty. We have seed banks. We have community of garden and community activism that builds our local economy. We have women empowerment programs at our institute. The institute, by the way, is part of Bethlehem University. We welcome you if you want to come and volunteer here. We have received volunteers from 47 countries. over 350 volunteers just in the past 3 years. And you would be more than welcome to come and join us. Our website is palestinenature.org, and I'll put it in the chat, and you can connect with me. So that's 10 minutes, and that's my word, and I'm sticking with it. So thank you very much for hosting me.
Thank you so much, Mazin. And I've put that link in the chat as well as a description. I see lots of love and applause coming from the participants. So really, we thank you so much for sharing with us today. All right. I'll go ahead and introduce our second panelist, Francois Kamate, a young climate and human rights defender from North Kivu province in Democratic Republic of Congo. He is a founding member of Amani Institute ASBL, as well as Extinction Rebellion Rutshuru, and is active with various aligned groups and campaigns such as Save Virunga, Lucha Congo, and Notre Terre Sans Pétrole, which means Our Land Without Oil. Francois will speak as an organizer and as a person with ongoing lived experience at the intersection of ecocide and genocide in the DRC, and he will present his recent work with the Our Land Without Oil campaign.
Thanks so much, Alexandria, for this space. I will go ahead. As you know, the Democratic Republic of Congo stands at the heart of a global paradox, a climate solution country yet plunged into chronic instability for over 3 decades. So rich in strategic natural resources like gold, coltan, cobalt, copper, lithium, and so forth and so on, Congo has become a target for armed groups or militias and foreign powers, often supported by neighboring countries like Rwanda. So these resources, instead of driving development and global energy transition, have been used to fuel conflict, to fund wars and destroy lives. So in Eastern Congo, women are raped, children are forcibly recruited in militias, communities are displaced, and thousands are killed in silence. So today, over 10 million people have died, 7 million internally displaced, countless disappearances, and mass rapes are used as weapons of wars. This is nothing less than a silent genocide that is happening in Congo. Meanwhile, powerful nations sign opaque bilateral investment treaties with our government and some other countries in the global south that benefit only foreign interests. So the most recent signed in Washington sells off our minerals and further weakens our sovereignty. So all while the Congolese population suffers from hunger, climate change, and extreme poverty. So adding to these injustices is the burden of illegitimate and colonial debt. The Democratic Republic of Congo is still trapped by a debt of more than 46 billion Belgian francs. This money was contracted not by the Congolese people, but by the Belgian colonial regime. This debt did not finance any local development. All the money was extracted and repatriated to Belgium. Yet today, this colonial debt continues to weigh heavily on Congo's economy, siphoning public funds that should go to education, public health, and sustainable development. So this is not an isolated case. Many countries, as I've said, in the global south remain shackled by unjust debt inherited from colonial or authoritarian regimes, depending inequality and dependence. So what is our response as like social movements in the Democratic Republic of Congo? So in the face of genocide, ecocide, and debt injustice, we refuse to remain silent. Our response is peaceful but firm. We believe that building people power is the only path to liberation. We believe in a civil and democratic resistance grounded in raising awareness, educating citizens about the root causes of conflict, poverty, and debt, public denunciation, exposing exploitative deals, illegitimate debt, and abusive policies, non-violent mobilization. So this comprises organizing campaigns, as Alexandre has mentioned, not to tear some petrol or our land without oil, Save Virunga, and some other campaigns. We organize peaceful marches, sit-ins, and advocacy actions, demanding climate and social justice, holding leaders accountable and more responsible, and pushing for people-centered governance. So one example is that since May 2025, the Congolese government has announced plans to exploit fossil fuels in the central Kivu, one of the world's largest carbon sinks, after, of course, the Amazon. If implemented, what will happen? This project will worsen the global climate crisis and destroy a vital ecosystem for all the humanity. That's why we launched a large-scale citizen campaign to pressure the government to abandon this disastrous project. Our resistance aims not only to protect the environment, but also to reclaim national sovereignty, where decisions are made by and for the people. In addition to this, we have to notice that only by building a critical mass of conscious, demanding, and united citizens can we end the cycles of violence, looting or plundering, and impunity. Only through structured, peaceful, and determined resistance can we build a Congo that is just, free, and sovereign. Because it is said that the silence of the people kills more than weapons. Today, we choose to speak, to rise, and to act, not just for Congo, but for the global justice.
Thank you so much, Francois. That was really great. I shared the Our Land Without Oil campaign link in the chat so people can check that out. And we'll move on to our third panelist today, Gina Cortez Valderrama, who is a Colombian activist who advocates for climate, racial, economic, and gender justice at the intersections of feminism, decoloniality, and degrowth. She coordinates the Just Transition Thematic Group, part of the UNFCCC's Women and Gender Constituency. And Gina will be focusing on the intersections between feminism, anti-imperialism, delinking, and degrowth, and share a Global South perspective on working towards economic, racial, climate, and gender justice. So thank you so much, Gina.
Thank you so much, and thanks as well to the other panelists that have opened this webinar today. It has been also great to see the different interconnections, and I think that I will follow on what has been already framed, and it's how imperialism has showed exposed very clearly its bleakest intentions in that race for power, in that race for profit accumulation, and something that we see and that has also been stated in the recent report from Francesca Albanese from Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide, is how after October 2023, we see those, and I quote her, long-standing systems of control, exploitation, and dispossession metamorphose into economic, technological, and political infrastructure to inflict mass violence and immense destruction. And we see that happening as well at the very same time in which in the last meeting that happened in The Hague in this NATO summit, we also saw a commitment from the countries that are part of the NATO, an increase of 5% of the GDP, in terms of what they are committing to be investing in the military complex. And these figures also go very much in line, and we can see as well that increase when one, for example, looks into how much was invested in the military complex in 2024, where we found that it was around 2.4 trillions. And this is an increase that we have seen going up and up year and after year. And if we think about other figures, and I like to bring these figures just for us to imagine how governments and states are not responding to investing in life and putting the money where it should be, but rather putting it into murder. For instance, we have how Germany for the year 2024 spent $88 million in the military complex. And if we compare only what Germany has spent in 2024 with the amount of money that was mobilized, not provided by, mobilized for climate finance by developed countries by 2020, that was $83 million. So what we see is a complete incoherent discrepancy, nonsense expenditure of public finance into murder and genocide. And what we see happening at the same time is how it is actually rewarded by that same system that keeps on looking growth and the increase in GDP, as a reward. The more we spend in military spending, the more then we have these points of progress. And it is also rewarded paradoxically as well in different promotions and mentions, where we see, for example, that lately Annalena Baerbock, which was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Germany during that time where increased militarization was, and in the same time that she fully supported Israel, is now being appointed as president of the General Assembly from the United Nations. So instead of putting in the critical eye, instead of stopping what is happening, we are rewarding those that are perpetrating murder. And this is something that we have to stop, and we have the power to stop. But we need to mobilize and we need to organize, particularly at the belly of the empire. Because while Global South peoples, communities, collectives are gathering to resist the different forms in which imperialism poses a threat into their lives in terms of economic sanctions, biodiversity loss, and so on. It is the responsibility of people in the North to stop this for extending even more, like in a higher way. And this happens as well at the same moment in which we see an increase of the far right's pushback to two things that happen in different locations, in different geographies, and that is not just a coincidence. But what we see is a pushback on women's gender not conforming, bodiless autonomy and rights. And at the same time, we see as well an increase of anti-immigration laws happening in many different countries. And this is, in the words of Nancy Kashinga, it's a way in which contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance have the roots in slavery, in colonialism, and imperialism, which have sought and still keep on doing sought the denial of social, political, and economic rights. And what we see that happening is because it is also in those racialized gender and southern bodies in which capitalism relies with the unpaid, unvalued, unrecognized care, domestic, and subsistent work that is done by these bodies. So the same bodies where we see that rights are shrinking is the same bodies that keep on being exploited by that neoliberal racial capitalist machinery. So this is not coincidence. And why I bring the attention here on this is because if we're going to move into organizing, move into campaigns, move into visions of degrowth that also shake the structures in which we are living, is not just about changing one system of extraction to another one, but is how we are really going to break what sustained capitalism and is that basis of the International Division of Labor that is so much framed in this way. And why I also like to bring that is to correlate that or put a little bit as well of bringing the attention of what is happening currently in the debates of just transitions. So we see a lot of conversation of just transition. Yes, we see that the harms that many of these corporate green transition is doing, but we are also missing the reflection, the analysis about how it's not only about changing one system of extraction to another one, but how we also need to build systems that break those chains of dependency, those chains of unequal exchange, in which is not only, and I put it Colombia's, Congo's case as well, in which is not only about the material that is being extracted and taken away for the lives of others, but it's also about whose bodies are used, whose times are used, the energy that is used for those processes of extraction, and also the land that is taken, a land that is taken under that notion and conception of empty space, because that is a common narrative that we see happening in the different geographies. It happens in Colombia, in El Cerrejón. It happens, and I was reading a news about that from Congo in a region where biofuels are increasing, and it was how is an empty space. Who cares about the space? Because there is this not life, there is this, and it's disregarding completely a spiritual meaning. It's also completely disregarding biodiversity, traditions, and also different livelihoods that are attached to the different ecosystems. So when thinking about as well those transitions, when thinking about industrial policies, is also bringing attention to how we are tackling that. Also bringing the attention on how we are shaping those transitions grounded on systems of care, in systems in which social protections are not just a privilege of a few, but also how this is also not disregarding and leaving aside the lives of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers that are also part of the whole web of labor and also of social reproduction. So these are all different things that are very much interconnected, that are very much intertwined, and as well as part of the different demands and the different advocacy that is happening currently, not only in the degrowth space, but mostly in feminist spaces, in climate spaces, is making these interconnections clear. And this is as well a message to take for the degrowth community, that when we're talking about degrowth, a degrowth project for the North, it is not about how we are going to move or how you are going to move into escapist solutions in which, yes, we have a solution perhaps somewhere in the rurality and we do our own systems of cooking and growing and whatsoever, but it's looking way beyond. Because one thing is the individual choice on how we take our choices of consumption, of production, etc. But another thing is our political project and strategy that we want to move in order to fight the far right, in order to fight imperialism, and in really to serve a wider project from the South, which is to de-link from that epistemic coloniality, to de-link from those industrial chains of exports-based rushes that happens on an illegitimate debt that keeps on growing and growing and growing every time more. And I think that my time is also over, but yeah, this is an invitation as well for us to shake a little bit more in the degrowth space. And I'm saying this because I also come from attending the degrowth conference in Oslo, where we see still that we are not moving beyond the conversations of individual choices as a political strategy for degrowth. And we have to move beyond that. We have to have uncomfortable conversations. We have to assess as well privilege. We have to accept as well that it cannot continue being an Eurocentric white movement, but it also needs to respond to the identities of migrants, of refugees, and to as well be aligned in connection with a wider project of delinking for the South. Yeah, thanks.
Wow, Gina, thank you so much. Again, lots of love and applause and appreciation from all the participants. Again, please, if you have any question or just comment you'd like to share with any of the panelists, go ahead and throw it in the chat. And we have one more panelist, and then we'll circle back to a few questions before we do the teach-in. So our final panelist tonight is Anna Libby. She's an eco-socialist organizer and member of Caracol from Denver DSA, as well as the Sunrise Movement. Anna is a systems scientist, environmental engineer, and activist interested in coalition building between environmental, economic, and racial justice movements. And Anna today will present her work as an organizer with the Stop Fueling Genocide campaign, targeting Chevron for Palestine and the planet, and share tools and resources for corporate pressure campaigns to win fossil-free and apartheid-free events. Go ahead, Anna.
Okay, thanks everyone. I didn't get the word we weren't doing slides, so unfortunately I'm doing some right now just to help me stay on topic. Yeah, thanks Alexandria for the intro. And I'm really speaking from my experience here living in the global north, at the heart of empire on unceded Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne land. And yeah, I wanted to share some reasons for launching this campaign, how we did it, and what have been some of the results, hopefully to inspire more people to start corporate pressure campaigns, boycott, divest, and sanctions campaigns against not just war profiteers, but polluters like Chevron that are deeply intertwined in ecocide and genocide. Yeah. So we don't really, this is not really living in reality where there's one person, for some reason, a white man making a choice between economic growth and sustainable progress. We really have to make this choice democratically and take the power away from the corporations impeding us. So I like degrowth because it really opposes this model of endless corporate accumulation, an extractivist global economy, and really pushes us to make systems level political changes. And corporate pressure campaigns can really weaken these powerful lobbies that block climate action, that block arms reduction, and definitely would never be in favor of redistribution of wealth. It really allows us to target our class enemies directly and delegitimize them in the eyes of the public, because when they lose some of their reputation, they lose so many very tangible benefits. So instead we get to popularize things the public actually wants, like public energy, peace and localized food systems. So I think grassroots pressure campaigns are a great tactic for pushing forward degrowth policies, and they're strategic stepping stones towards those policies that align with our goals. So part of why we picked Chevron, first, globally, they are the 4th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world and the largest private investor-owned company that's contributed to climate change. So from the Carbon Majors database, which is allowing people around the world to sue oil and gas companies for the damages, the very real damages we're already facing, Chevron came in number 4 at 2.85% of cumulative, from historical to today, CO2 emissions. So they're greater than Exxon, greater than BP, and they really should be paying for the costs of the climate crisis that we're experiencing because of this. So they're also a huge contributor to Ecocide. Pressure campaigns against corporations like Chevron have been used to delegitimize and defund these industries, because as we see with what they've done in Ecuador, for example, it's really just incompatible with any sort of sustainable and just future. Chevron in Ecuador deliberately discharged over 16 billion gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste into the Ecuadorian Amazon. And people's traditional livelihoods, indigenous peoples of the Amazon, were gone within a decade. And Chevron has never paid anything for this. They have, the courts decided that Chevron should pay the indigenous communities $9.5 billion. And so far, nobody has seen a penny of this because Chevron has vowed to fight it in court until they can no longer. They've even locked up Stephen Donziger, the human rights lawyer who was responsible for litigating this case. Many people here are probably very familiar with that. But if you're not, look up his activism around this. Chevron is also really directly complicit in Israel's genocide. Since 2020, when they acquired Noble Energy, they've been drilling for natural gas. Well, really methane gas, there's nothing natural about it. They've been drilling right off the shores of Gaza. So these are actually resources that do technically belong to the Palestinian people. And instead, Chevron has funneled $462 million in tax revenue to the government of Israel because of this. And the government then uses this to wage war and also fuel the electricity of Israel's grid, which they do also control Gaza's grid as well. So since our enemies are intertwined, our liberation struggles must be too. And that's why we looked here in Denver at some inspiration campaigns, for example, from Houston. There was a previous BDS campaign against the Houston Marathon, which was sponsored by Chevron. And when we asked ourselves, like, well, why are all these oil and gas companies, war profiteers, polluters sponsoring these public events? There's so many. There's science fairs, there's state fairs, arts fairs, things like that. The real reason is because it actually buys them goodwill. There was a 2015 report that Chevron saw a 200% increase in public support in areas with visible sponsorships. And they do this deliberately in areas where they are drilling, polluting, and spilling. So in Colorado, Chevron is our largest producer of oil and gas. All the fracking that's going on, the spills that happen, they're directly responsible. So we don't think that they should get to buy public goodwill by sponsoring something family-friendly like a marathon. So basically, taking as a case study, we started a pressure campaign against Chevron's sponsorship of the Denver Colfax Marathon. This was a grassroots campaign with about 4 local groups coming together, both from the environmental justice spaces, Palestinian orgs, and a lot of people fired up about removing them from this event. So it's the biggest marathon in the Rocky Mountain region with about 20,000 people. And we found in our research that only 1% of their funding came from corporate sponsors. So we thought it was like a realistic and winnable ask to ask the marathon organizers to stop taking money from Chevron. So how we went about this, only a few months before the race is really when we got started. We held a teach-in, talked about genocide and ecocide actually, and had some really great discussions to really build this like coalition of orgs interested in making progress on this. In April, we began organizing run clubs, directly involving runners as like our key constituency who were going to pressure the marathon for us. So we canvassed them to sign a petition to drop Chevron from the race. And for any runners who signed the petition, we also offered them like this special sticker called a bib that they would put next to their race number for their event. So they would show solidarity during their event. And we found this was like very successful. People were very happy to sign the petition and take a bid from us. And we experienced like a lot of support from the runner community. We got 500 signatures in just 2 days right before the race. And we could have kept going, but it was time to deliver the petition. So during race weekend, we dropped some banners. We delivered the petition directly to the sponsorships director to her face. We cheered on the runners and kept the tone kind of like positive, where we were supporting this community event. We were just upset that Chevron was a part of it and thought that runners deserved a better sponsor. So that was like kind of like the tone and messaging around this. We wanted to make sure that people were very clear that we were not hating on the marathon. We were just hating on Chevron. So this all happened. And then 6 weeks after the race, just last week, the sponsorship was dropped for 2026. And we can definitely claim credit for this. Chevron was the only top tier sponsor not to renew. And we're trying to now like get some like local press and action celebrating this win. and tying it into Chevron's like economic struggles with layoffs and diminishing profits as well. So yeah, we think we've made a tangible difference to their reputation, and going forward, we're going to be targeting like more community events, sponsorships of news media, especially misleading greenwashing ads in our local publications. And we hope that any nonprofit or event would think twice before taking genocide money in the future because of this campaign. So yeah, and then just like these came out from celebrating the win on the BDS official Instagram the other day. There's a couple other wins this year too, including the California State Fair dropped their Chevron sponsorship. And several gas stations in Florida so far have signed under the boycott and said that they won't distribute or sell Chevron gas anymore. So yeah, I think that the environmental movement, the movement for Palestinian rights, we're stronger together, and this is something that's achievable locally at any scale, and we can grow from there. So.
Thank you so much, Anna. Lots of applause from the participants as well. So that concludes the panel portion of today's event. We do have a few minutes and a few questions in stack. The first one we received is for Professor Mazin Qumsiyeh. Anna asks, how do you feel about the nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize? If you would like to comment on that.
Well, I think it was good publicity, but of course I won't win it because they give it usually to war criminals and people like Henry Kissinger and Rabin and others. So it's good publicity for the cause. That's the only thing I consider positive about it, is being nominated for that. But you know, recognition for me, if I could just save one child in Gaza, you know, we're trying to help. This is what we need to focus on. We're helping some people in Gaza now, literally starving. People are dying of hunger. 18 children actually died of starvation in the past 24 hours in Gaza, and 135 were killed directly by the Israeli military, and over 395 were injured. And just in 24 hours, this is an accelerating genocide. That's what we need to focus on. We need to do everything in our power to stop it. And, you know, here in the West Bank, it's starting to happen also as they are destroying homes in the Tulkarem refugee camp, Nur Shams, and other places. Over 65 communities were uprooted in the West Bank. Of course, all the people of Gaza were rendered homeless, their homes were destroyed. But here in the West Bank, over 45,000 people are homeless now because of the ethnic cleansing acceleration campaign that's not done by Israel alone. It's done by the Western world. It's really the US, France, Germany, England. Those are countries that are directly participating in the genocide and ethnic cleansing of our people, and we need to make it stop.
Thank you, Mazin. We have another question. This one, I believe, was directed towards Gina, and it's from Ida. First, there's some comment of appreciation for all the panelists, especially representing so many different parts of the world, regions outside the US, and that the ecological movement tends to be centered in white and privileged voices that tend to treat other countries or land in a subservient relationship. Ida says that they've also found that social justice and eco-justice tend to sometimes be antagonistic towards one another. So some social justice movements see the environmental movement as something privileged and do not incorporate these ideas. So the question comes in, I'm wondering how this can be more harmonized. There's a movement here to push mandatory air conditioning in people's homes to alleviate the effects of climate change and heat. And I'm wondering your thoughts on campaign ideas like these.
I perhaps would also leave space for others to respond, because I think it's not only for me, but when you read it, it already tells you, right? So eco movement centering white privileged voices. And then the other campaign that these, from my understanding of the text, is that this eco movement is doing is about pushing mandatory air conditioning. Is it that as something that comes with privilege to have air conditioner or no? I mean, like how structural is also being the campaigns, or like how much are the campaigns or the work responding not from that status of privilege, but also from the realities that we have been listening today in this webinar? How is that responding to truly a world in which is not moving forward for the good life of some at the expenses of a few? And I think that that can support as well folks in the thinking of, okay, what are we doing, like how degrowth in our regions, because as we were speaking, and at the beginning it was said, degrowth is not about austerity, is not about scarcity, is not about, but degrowth is about truly breaking, the more how and what, when you were saying, Alexandra, what we are building is about resisting, confronting the US empire, building solidarity, pursue ecological justice. Then I think that that also gives us some elements to then contrast, is this really responding to how we are breaking the empire? It doesn't mean that we are not doing stuff, or we are not doing activities that of course help us to have more dignified lives with our local communities, that also help us to build systems of care. But in a place where the empire is growing, where white supremacy is extending way quickly, these questions need to be confronted within your own collectives in a critical manner, in a manner that responds to the urgency that the South is living, an urgency in which genocide is going more and more, like, in which icelines are already drawing, in which, right? So yeah, I could leave it there, and perhaps others could also answer, as I think that this is a question of international solidarity as well, when trying to build like a more connected movement. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Gina. We've got maybe 1 or 2 minutes left if someone else would like to add on to that response. And then last, we have one last question in stack, this one for Francois. I'll go ahead and read out this question from Nikhil. Francois, what strategies have you adopted to engage with the political system in the Congo? Are you primarily focused on efforts beyond electoral or formal politics?
Right. Thanks so much for this question. So I would like to say that we are not involved in the political system in Congo. Why? Because for us, we still think that politicians are not cautious, and politicians, they are just work for their own benefit. This is the case of whatever that is happening in Congo. So the major idea that we promote is to empower, to mobilize and sensitize people, I mean, Congolese all over the country, how they can take non-violent actions, how they can, be more demanding to those politicians so that we can make them responsible and accountable. Because today, the issue is that most of Congolese don't know that they don't know that they have what we call the civic power. And the civic power, it is the only way of, ending this imperialist system, this colonial system, since politicians, they're just working for capitalists, for imperialists. I have recently mentioned here what we call bilateral investment treaties. So if you analyze all these treaties, they are concluded between a poor country and a rich country. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo concludes one contract with Belgium. So when you analyze deeply, what is said in the contract is that Congo must invest in Belgium and Belgium must invest in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is vice versa. But here you will understand that our country is not able to have an investment in Belgium since we do not possess the means of production. Everything that is consumed in Congo is imported. We are exporting, coltan, cobalt, copper, gold, silver, and so forth and so on. But we are not producing nothing. Even a single tomato, everything that we are consuming here in Congo, we need to take them from neighboring countries. I don't know, Rwanda, Uganda, I don't know, Tanzania. So the political system is full of, people who are not conscious, as I've said, people who do not care about what we call the Congolese dignity, about what we call, the social change, the positive change that we are fighting for. So reason why we think that after sensitizing, after mobilizing Congolese, we make them conscious, we make them more demanding to those politicians. These ones will be responsible and, accountable.
Thank you so much, Francois. All right, so we're now ready to move into the second part of our event today, which is an interactive teach-in, where we'll be breaking into 4 different rooms, and you will all be able to actually choose which room you prefer to be in. And panelists as well, of course, if you have time and would like to jump into one of these rooms or hop in and out of different rooms, we can do that as well. Well, thank you from all of us at Caracol, to the panelists, to the facilitators, and to everyone who participated today. We can send anyone who registered with their email address. We'll be sending some of these links and resources that we shared today. Otherwise, you can always get in touch with us through our website or social media. And we look forward to organizing with you all very, very soon.